Good evening, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Bear Dash. It has been an eventful couple of days, to say the least. But in the words of our good friend Joshua, let's go. Let's get started. Let's get underway. Um, I'd like to take a moment just to. We're obviously in a big moment as a nation, and I know there's a lot on the table. But please stay safe, stay sane, keep yourself educated, and be smart about what you're putting out there, what you're saying, and what's being said. Just use your brain, as you should. But if you haven't heard, Cal season opener is canceled. If you thought 2020 could not get any more dramatic and any worse, guess what? You thought wrong. The Bears were scheduled to open up against the Huskies this weekend at Memorial Stadium. That is no longer the case after a positive COVID test. The game has been canceled. It's official. Look it. Look ahead to next week if we can. Shaylin, there's a lot to say about this. There's also a lot to just feel. I think Bears fans are disappointed. Players are disappointed. I'd say we're disappointed. Talk to me about it. Is this the worst possible week one scenario? What's going on?
Yeah, I mean, you talked about the election. It feels like a lot of people were bored, like at some point during from March to now. Everyone had extreme boredom at some point during quarantine. And now it just felt like with the election and schools in full swing, people are working, doing whatever they're doing. People are starting to feel like overwhelmed. And this was like one of the things that like was just supposed to be something to look forward to. Like no matter what happened with the election, the Cal Golden Bears were playing football on Saturday, and that's like what a lot of people were looking forward to. And that's just not happening anymore, and it sucks. It sucks for us that we've been doing these episodes for weekly for the past like 3 months or so, but at the end of the day, it's just I feel horrible for the players. It's not about us. They've worked hard to get here. I feel gutted for Coach Wilcox. You could tell during his press conference that he was mad, he was sad, and deservedly so. I mean, they prepped really hard for this game and for the season overall, and for just one player to test positive and all that go down the drain, kind of it sucks. It really does. You had a chance to talk to Coach Wilcox in his interview. What was kind of the vibe during that, and what was his perspective and the team's perspective?
Yeah, like you said, he's frustrated. He's upset, and I mean, you can't blame him. These guys have put in a lot of work. They're very hopeful. I think if you talk to anyone on the team, they were just happy to be back out there. And now that they're not, that hurts. This is something they love. Um, I think it's worth bearing some perspective on, but I think it's also worth winding back up a little bit and breaking it down. Shaylin mentioned there's just been one positive test on the Cal football team. The reason this has been so devastating is that due to contact tracing protocols and then subsequent quarantine protocols, a whole position group has been ruled out. They're not going to be allowed to play. And that's not due to Cal's regulations or the Pac 12's regulations. That's due to local Berkeley public health recommendations.
And
But
I think
to get back to it,
that just quickly, I think that's the part that frustrated players the most is that they're seeing these other schools. You're seeing 45 minutes down the road, Santa Clara, the 49ers are playing a game right now as we speak with multiple positive tests on their team. So I think that's what a lot of the frustration is stemming from the players. And we both get it. Health comes first, and it should come first. But I think there's just even Coach Wilcox made it clear that he doesn't really know what the protocol is because it's up to the city officials.
absolutely. And I think that's part of what frustrated him. I mean, he talked about it. The team has been open, willing, and ready to implement any procedures, any protocols, anything they've had to do to play, to be out there on the field, to get ready for this weekend, they have done. And they've been open, they've been willing, they've been even excited to do it. The players have followed quarantine guidelines, they've been at home, they haven't been getting out. I think everyone we've talked to, the perspective has been, hey, anything we need to do to play, we're going to do it. We're going to take care of it. That's what we're about. So I think now, when you feel like you've done all that, you put in all this work, and suddenly it doesn't matter. Like there's still other procedures that are in place, and that stops you from playing. I can see that being very frustrating, and I also think it's a frustrating situation, and there aren't a lot of people to blame. I think far be it for me to be a public health official because I'm not. I don't have that information. And if this is the call that's being made, I feel like it's probably a safe call. And Wilcox said it himself. It's a big picture view, and it may be upsetting in the present, but safety should come first. I mean, I think another question to ask is the goal here to be safe or is the goal to play football? And I know that a lot of people want to play football, but I think safety should come first. And
Yeah, and I think
that's my take.
yeah, but I think where a lot of the frustration stems from is that the players feel as though they're being safe, because one of the things, we should give some backstory on this. I'll get there in a second, but one of the things that the players don't understand, the coaches don't really understand, and we don't really understand is that, like, Coach Wilcox thought that when the players who were in contact tracing tested negative, they would be allowed to come back and play. But he was told that that was not allowed. So just for some backstory, yesterday we received news that one individual player, had tested positive through the daily antigen test and then was tested again with the PCR test, which is supposed to be a little more detailed and counter for being a false positive. But that also came back positive. That player is still asymptomatic right now. We don't know who it is, but what we do know is that entire position group, whatever position that player plays, they're all in quarantine right now for contact tracing protocol purposes. And Coach Wilcox said there are even more players outside of that position group that are also in quarantine. So they were all held out of practice yesterday. The coaches had to modify certain drills. They were extremely careful at practice yesterday. But now, like, Coach Wilcox got word this morning that they're just not allowed to play based on the city ruling. And we originally thought that it was the Pac-12 who made that decision. But actually, what the Pac-12 has in its rules is that the team must have enough players to play, which in the Pac-12's rules, it's at least 53 scholarship players available, and also a minimum of 7 offensive linemen, 1 quarterback, and 4 defensive linemen. So the Pac-12 gives those guidelines, but it's up to the city of Berkeley to decide really which players are available and which players are not available. That's not the Pac-12 decision. So then Cal, when they realized they didn't meet that 53 criteria or whatever position group it may be, they alerted the Pac-12, and the Pac-12 canceled the game. So that's where we're at right now. In terms of what position group it may be, Coach Wilcox didn't say due to privacy reasons, and that's fully understandable. But he said you guys can probably figure it out because it's a position that's like fully irreplaceable. So for me, I think of the offensive line or defensive line. I would just imagine it being one of those players, because he kind of alluded to them being just like physically impossible to replace. Like he said, there was no one else on the team who just could play those positions, because he was fully in on the idea that if they had 53 players and if they met all those minimum position requirements, they were going to play. Like, I don't think he cared if the wide receivers had to play cornerback. Like, they were going to play, and he made that very clear, but they did not meet the criteria, and that's what they are.
Yeah, and to go off your point, there's a lot of supposition you can do about who these players are, what happened, and the fact is we just don't know. The school hasn't released it, and like Shaylin said, these guys are entitled to privacy. The school is handling it, and the program is handling it internally, and that's very much their right and their way of doing things. But given what we know of the Pac-12 guidelines that Shaylin mentioned, the Pac-12 specifically named offensive linemen, defensive linemen, and quarterbacks as the 3 positions of need where you needed a specific number of players to be able to play. Again, we don't know anything beyond what we've given you, but those are just some of the parameters to look at and think about. And again, this is just one player that's tested positive, which I think does make it a really tricky situation going forward. It's just one player, but the ramifications of that are present. They're there, and it's a reminder that we're living during a pandemic, and things are never simple. Things are never easy. It's never straightforward.
I think we got a bit of a false sense of security just with everything going right. Cal didn't have a single positive test for all of the Pac-12 official daily testing until, of course, 3 days before the game. So I think we kind of, like, me and you and probably a lot of fans were like, okay, the Pac-12 kind of has this figured out. Like, Like there's no positive tests. The players are practicing normally. All the media sessions are going well. Everything seemed to be going exactly as the Pac-12 had planned it. And then all it takes is one misstep, and this is where you end up. But you know, people are mad, and Wilcox says he doesn't blame them though for the players to be mad. And Wilcox admitted himself that he's very mad, and like there's no one person or one group of people that they're mad at. It's just mad at the fact that they can't play football, and they've been looking forward to it for so long.
This is a frustrating situation. It's a pandemic. It's something we can't control, and you work really hard at something you love, and to have that taken away at the last minute, due to something that you like, again, you really can't control. It's not like you weren't working hard enough as a player. It's not like you weren't coaching well enough. It's just these are trying times.
One of the things that really got me was that Coach Wilcox said that after one of the practices, a lot of the seniors and juniors got together and gave just like a pleading to their team to follow the guidelines, because those juniors and seniors know that their time is limited. Even Wilcox said himself that like the coaches can coach until they basically can't walk or talk anymore. They have all the time they want to coach, but the players, with NCAA guidelines and just their overall career goals or whatever the case may be, they have very limited time in college. And just to see them after, even just right now, it's just a single game, but it just feels so significant to have to miss. But, you know, this is one game, right? There's still a whole season. So just to start off, how is this going to affect the team moving forward, and maybe starting with ASU, because that game just factually is in jeopardy right now.
Yeah, I think that's a really good way of putting it. It is in jeopardy. If nothing changes between today and next weekend, the game wouldn't happen. That doesn't mean things aren't likely to change. That doesn't mean it's impossible that things do change. But if we're in the same situation a week from now, the Arizona State game will get canceled. It doesn't matter that it's away. If players are quarantined, again, according to local public health guidelines, they must stay quarantined. You can't leave and travel to somewhere where the rules are different. So I think Wilcox described it this way too. It's a game that's also in jeopardy. However, he also, I think, was a bit more hopeful. I mean, there's a week. Again, we're not aware of exactly what these guidelines are, what the procedures are going to be going forward. I don't think Wilcox is aware. I think this is something that public health officials will know and adjust as testing comes around, as more information comes to light. But at least for the next game, I think the Cal football team is going to take it one day at a time. They're going to continue to practice. They're going to continue to prepare as best they can, given the players they have. And if they can play, they'll play. And if they can't, they can't. And I think we can only do what they're doing, which is take it one day at a time.
Yeah, and I think one of the parts that's confusing, at least to me, is that the general like public, I feel like U.S. consensus is that you quarantine for 14 days. And that's what Wilcox was asked that during the press conference. Like people who think they've been exposed, it's usually 14 days. And he was asked whether these players in that position group and who, you know, potentially made contact, will they have to quarantine for 14 days? And he said that's up to the city officials. So it's for them to decide whether the ASU game can happen or not. But assuming there's no other positive tests, they're just going to remain in quarantine until they get the clearance. But in terms of, you know, even beyond the ASU game, this team's not out. The Pac-12 prepared for this scenario. They knew it would happen. I highly doubt Cal versus UW is going to be the only game of the Pac-12 season that gets canceled. I would not be surprised if, especially in some of the California or Washington schools that are a bit more strict on these type of things, they could see games getting canceled. So just to, you know, clarify for people, because I had to look up these rules. There's so many contingencies, but basically this year's division champs are not selected based on record as they normally are. It's going to be based on winning percentage. So, however, though, if two teams have the same number of losses and played a different amount of games, it is not determined by winning percentage. Because so if Cal goes 4-1 and Oregon goes 5-1, they played a different amount of games, but they have the same amount of losses, for example. The winner of the division would be whoever won the Cal-Oregon game. So in that case, it's not win percentage because Cal had less opportunities to play than Oregon. So assuming they both have one loss, it will come down to a head-to-head matchup. But if the two teams don't play each other, say the Cal-Oregon game got canceled and they were still the top two teams in the division, then it goes down to a bunch of other tiebreakers. First is head-to-head, like I said, but if they didn't play, then it goes to their division record, how they do against other Pac-12 North teams. And then it goes down to all the stuff that I'm sure the Pac-12 officials are hoping it doesn't go to. Like one of those is the CFP ranking. And then you go farther down the list, it's like some analytics company, what they have as like their like composite ranking for the team. And then it goes down to a coin toss. So there's a lot of contingencies, but the other aspect of it is to be able to, a team in contention of winning has to have played within one game of the average amount of games played in that division. So this is a lot of math, but basically
get out your calculators.
So to dumb it down a little, if the average number of games played by Pac-12 North teams is 5.25, right? That's an example taken directly from their website. If the Pac-12 North teams play 5.25 games on average, they round that down to 5 games. Thus, a team would have to have played 4 games to be eligible for the division title. So if Cal somehow only plays, like they're already down to 6, right? If they miss the ASU game, that's when you get into a little bit of trouble because you don't want to really go down to like 3 or 4 games total played on the season. Because then if most teams don't miss games and the average is like 5.5, then Cal would be automatically disqualified from winning the division. So it's really just a scenario where we have to wait and see.
Yeah. And just to reiterate as well, if Pac-12 or if Cal somehow does not qualify for the Pac-12 championship game, it doesn't mean there still aren't reasons to play. There's a lot of draft eligible players who could really raise their stock with a couple of good performances. Again, small sample size, but you think about guys like Cam Bynum, Coin Dang, who just need to really show up and show that they haven't regressed in any way, that they've added a couple physical tools and that they can enhance their draft stock just a little bit. So on the individual level, there's still a lot at stake. There's still a lot to play for. Guys want to get there. And then they also just want to play and have fun. I mean, this is a game a lot of these guys enjoy. It's a big part of their life. And I'm sure whether it's 6 games or 2 games, they're going to take every minute they can get. It also bears remembering that we're not entirely sure how the postseason is going to turn out. I've talked a lot about the CFP on this show before. I'm not talking about it now because I do think those odds drastically decrease with this cancellation. But there are other bowl games in play. I don't know what maybe what people would say about a 5-1 Cal team, about a 4-2 Cal team, about like a 4-0, 3-0 Cal team conceivably. Again, we don't know what the results of this are going to be, but that is also something that's in play. That's also something to play for. I mean, the last couple of years, Cal's target has been to make a bowl game and to win a bowl game, and there doesn't really need to be a reason that changes. Again, depending on the amount of games you're willing to play and how exactly everything shakes out. So there are still tangible things to play for, even if for some reason Cal is not able, or for not some reason, for a reason Shaylin outlined, Cal is not able to play for a division title.
Yeah, and Coach Wilcox has made it explicitly clear that they're not looking that far down yet. They're not focused on all the complex scenarios that I just tried to break down. They're focused on figuring out a way to get their players eligible to play while also being as safe as possible. And now preparing for ASU is their number one priority. But I want to ask you a question. How would you feel about going straight into a game against a very talented ASU team with no warm-up? Because I think a lot of people were on the fence about I think more people probably would pick ASU over UW as a harder opponent. So missing out on that warm-up game against Washington is a pretty big deal because this is a new offensive playbook. Right. The team needed to build some chemistry. Even the defense, half the players are new starters. You're missing out on that opportunity and going into a game against Arizona State, which is going to have a great warm up against USC. We don't know if they're going to win that game or not, but they're going to have some talented competition, something that Cal won't have until they potentially play them. How would you feel about that game?
Look, just thinking about the ASU game, Cal's hurt a lot of ways from this. I mean, that's an obvious statement. That's not a hot take right there by any stretch. But yeah, Cal's not going to have a chance to tune up. They're not going to have a chance to work out the kinks. Like you said, it's a new offense that doesn't just happen. That doesn't just get inserted. Not to say that that's not a possibility, but I mean, you like it better if you've had like the first quarter of UW to work through some errors, and then you can really hit the ground running against a tough team like ASU who beat you last year. And now you're going into Arizona, and Cal hasn't won in Arizona in a decade. They've struggled mightily against schools from the Grand Canyon State. So that's a strike right there. And you also got to think you're having a position group that's quarantined right now, which means they're not able to do as much practice, able to get up to speed. And I mean, this could be very relevant. Again, we don't know which position group this is, but I mean, say it's the O-line, right? Then you're installing a new offense without your offensive line. And again, not to say that a lot of that installation hasn't already taken place, but hey, every little practice helps. Every little detail can be honed that much finer when you have more time. So you're also losing an entire position group, and that doesn't do you any favors. I mean, I can't see Cal coming out of this week, and I mean, even if they can play the Arizona State game, being favored in any way. You're on the road. I mean, this is something that really it's chaotic, it's stressful. There certainly is an opportunity to bounce back. I wouldn't be surprised if these guys get out there and they're just hungry, ready to play, fired up because you're happy to be there. But I think from sort of a logistical standpoint, from an objective standpoint, I'm not sure I could look at this game and call a Cal victory with any confidence.
Yeah, and in terms of the ASU game, just to relay some information, Coach Wilcox has said that the team will have to know by Monday at the very latest whether they can play that game or not. He said he hopes to know by this weekend whether they can play, but it could take till Monday. But that's enough hypotheticals for now. Let's go to something that actually in stone, which is Cal's week 1 depth chart. Now, obviously, they're not playing week 1, but there's a lot of interesting surprises here. So if we want to start off with the offense, we talked a couple episodes ago about the position battle between the inside linemen. So McCade Mattower, Daltoso, and Cindric. And despite playing every single snap on offense last season, Cindric is not named a starter. He will instead be backup center, while Daltoso starts at left guard and Mattower at right guard. If one of the tackles were to get injured, I would expect Daltoso to slide out there and then Cindric to come in at right guard. But, there's a lot of one of the things the team prides itself on this season is the ability to have a versatile offensive line. That's something Musgrave has talked a lot about, having those players play different positions. So, I mean, injuries happen all the time. I would expect Cindric to get plenty of playing time this season, either whether he comes off the bench or starts. What was something else on the offense that surprised you? Because there's a couple things that were definitely a bit shocking.
Yeah. And first, sorry, real quick, we have a chat box here. Thank our viewers out there who have dropped some nice little compliments, but feel free to add some questions if you have them about, again, anything we're saying. We always like to slow down and look around. In terms of the offensive line, I think this speaks more to the depth that Cal has at the positions rather than one player being particularly good or particularly bad. I do also want to touch on the fact that Putasi was named the backup left guard. He's someone, I think, offensive line coach Angus McClure said had improved a lot in the offseason. So I think this is just it's a reification of all the work he's done. And it's just nice to see him there. It's very interesting. But again, this is a deep O-line unit. I think the other huge shock and on the offensive side of the ball is Colin Moore being named the starting tight end.
Yeah.
This is something you and I have talked about. I think when the roster first came out, you texted me, you were like, hey, you texted the group chat with this. I mean, all caps. It's a big surprise. Colin Moore has 2 career catches entering this season. One of those was for a touchdown last year again in the Red Box Bowl against Illinois, but he doesn't have the same type of experience that both Reinwald and Tonjes have. And Tonjes is behind him in the depth chart. What do you think is up with that? I mean, we have heard a lot about him through fall camp, but what he eats.
Yeah, I mean, I think he benefits from Musgrave the most. It's a new coach, it's a new system, it's pretty much a blank slate. And Wilcox has really praised his work ethic and his just ability to bounce back from injury. He actually came to Cal as a quarterback, and they converted him to tight end. He's got a pretty big body. He's 6'4", can definitely move pretty well, but neither of us saw this coming whatsoever. For us, it was a discussion of who's going to be number one, Tonjes or Reinwald. But Colin Moore's going to take that spot, and we're going to see all three of those guys play. I mean, Musgrave has made that clear that those guys are all going to get plenty of playing time. There's going to be a lot of 2 tight end sets, but that was a major surprise. And just we're running a bit out of time here, so just to finish the offensive side off really quick. No surprises at wide receiver. Both of us thought that Remigio, Kekoa Crawford, Makai Polk, and Trevon Clark were the clear top 4. I would guess that freshman Jeremiah Hunter is probably 5th on the depth chart, even though this one only went 2 deep.
He'll get some looks.
Yeah, and then the only other thing was at fullback. I actually thought Zach Angelillo would win that job, but it was Kentucky transfer Drew Schlegel. So it's going to be very interesting to see how Musgrave uses him, because neither of us have seen a fullback really be used during our time at Cal. But moving over to the defensive side, what were some of the things you noticed?
I don't think there's a single starting position on the defensive line where I was really like shocked or surprised. I think these are guys that we've been pretty sure about. There are a lot of openings going into camp, but I think it was pretty clear pretty early on how they were going to be filled. The thing that stuck out to me was you're seeing a lot of true freshmen in that second string spot. I mean, a lot of true freshmen, and there's been a lot of praise, but it's maybe not really surprising, but it's exciting to see those guys put on the depth chart,
Yeah, I mean, we knew that would probably happen on the defensive line just because of how thin the defensive line is. But you're seeing guys like Iosefa at inside linebacker or Trey Pastor at safety. Those are guys who are probably going to see some playing time, especially now that we know that coronavirus is like a real, it's like hitting this team. Like there could be different players at different position groups out throughout the season. So, and then Colin Gamble at cornerback. And that's another position that might look funky on the depth chart because Cam Bynum, obvious number 1 at cornerback, but then the number 2 starting cornerback on the other side is listed at Josh Drayden, who's traditionally a nickel cornerback, right? He plays in the slot. The reason I think it's listed like this is just because, I mean, like in a base formation, you only have 2 corners, but let's be real, Cal's base formation is nickel. They played it over 50% of the time last season, way more than base. And realistically, it's going to be Cam Bynum and Chigozie Anusium on the outside, and then Josh Drayden on the inside. I think they're listing Drayden as a starter, one, just because, I mean, he's proven to be extremely talented. He's a leader on this team. He's a senior. They trust him a lot. I don't know if they're going to have him play outside or not this season, but it will be interesting to see that. Other than that, you're right. There's not many surprises. We made our kind of starting predictions and our predictions, and we were spot on pretty much all of those. Evan Tattersall won the inside linebacker spot, which we kind of knew coming in. Daniel Scott won the safety spot, and then Braxton Crotow won the other outside linebacker spot.
Yeah. What about kick return and punt return, though? Nico Remigio is the guy named at both those positions, and there's no doubting the guy's fast. But this is interesting. I think throughout camp, Wilcox talked about this position as being very open. They had a lot of guys they were trying, some really experienced, some newer guys with speed. And so I think this almost surprises me because I expected there to be a lot of variability here. I expected at least three different guys to be named to those 2 positions, and it's just 2. It's just Crawford and Remigio at both.
Yeah, I mean, we also talk about how secretive Wilcox is. He puts out a depth chart because they're required to put out a depth chart. So, I mean, this says a lot, but it doesn't say everything. So we're going to see a lot of names that don't appear on this depth chart at all get some snaps, and it'll be really interesting to see how different positions progress as the season goes on. That's about how much time we have for today, though. A little bit of a somber episode.
Absolutely. And yeah, it's a tough one, folks. But it's a good reminder. We're still in the midst of a pandemic. We'll all have to adjust, and we can't take anything for granted. But yeah, these are chaotic times, so please stay safe. We hope we've been able to provide you an escape at least from all the crazy hoo-ha that's going on right now. Not that it's not important. Please pay attention. Educate yourself. Be smart. Be kind. Be a good person. Be a good citizen. But we're always here. We're always here for half an hour a week.
Hopefully, we'll have some football next time too.
Hopefully, have some football to talk about. In the words of our good friend Justice De Los Santos, stay hydrated. That's all, folks, and good.